blow down.
Yeah, several
Last
times.
Wednesday we had pretty good winds come through here.
It's an echoey in here. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Destination Medical Center Corporation Board meeting on Thursday, June 23rd. And the first item is a call of the roll, and I'll do that right now. Councilmember Hickey?
Here.
Commissioner Beer?
Here.
Mayor Ryback?
Here.
Mayor Brady?
Here.
Mr. Doherty?
Here.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
And I believe, I'm very sorry to say that our colleague Susan Ronnie was intending to be here, but she has come down ill and is not here. So, but we have a quorum, so we will proceed. I'd like to move for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes for May 26th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries. Next item on our agenda is the public comment period. If there's anybody from the public that would like to briefly address our board, please come forward now and welcome. Okay. Seeing no interest in public comment today, we will go on. This is what I thought might happen with this board meeting. We'll go on to the chair's report. Colleagues, I just have a couple of brief mentions today. You'll note that our agenda is very brief today, and the reason for that primarily is that we have this extended joint meeting with our colleagues from the Rochester City Council and the EDA board this afternoon. We had intended to spend a significant amount of time during this board meeting talking about transportation, but I'm quite excited that we've moved that conversation to the joint meeting, where I think it'll be extremely valuable for all three of our governing boards to have the opportunity to hear about the transportation discussion and talk about it together. So the only other item I wanted to just mention to all of my colleagues today is that we are entering into the budgeting season. As you'll recall, we work on the budget in the late summer and fall, and then what happens is that the EDA submits a budget to this board on August 1st, and then we evaluate that budget and make any amendments or changes that we feel necessary, working in partnership with the city and the EDA board, and then we forward that budget to the city, and the city approves it. Or not, but it's the city acts on it. And so I have two things I wanted to ask you of today. One is, and this is really actually something I propose that we suggest to the city, our contract requires that we submit our budget to the city by September 1st. However, last year we postponed that submission until October 1st, which gave us a little bit more opportunity to work with our colleagues at the city and the EDA to get a budget pulled together that we all felt comfortable with. So I'm going to ask this board if it is okay with you if I approach the city and ask them for that little bit more time. And so I'd love to hear your feedback on that. And then second of all, in the past we have also appointed an ad hoc budget group from this committee that has the opportunity to kind of dive in a little bit deeper onto the budget issues. And I know that our colleague Commissioner Beer, our treasurer, is interested in serving on that committee, and I wanted to see if I had other volunteers from our board who might be willing to do that as well.
I participated last year, and I'm happy to do it again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. That's great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I'd be interested too, Chairman Smith.
Okay, wonderful. So that is, that I think will be extremely helpful.
Yeah, that'll help me a lot.
That's right. And is there a sense of this board about whether you feel that that extra month for us to work with the city on the budget before we submit it to the city would be beneficial?
Makes sense to me. Yep.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Then we'll consult further on that. But I can see heads nodding from city staff who are the ones that have to pull all of this together for your board. So that's great. The only other item on my chair's report is that I am delighted to report that it is the birthday of Mayor Brady today. And
30 again?
Yeah, right.
you're very welcome. I am so grateful for your ongoing friendship and work on this board that I believe I will spare you a rendition of Happy Birthday from the DMCC singers. So
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
you're welcome. All right, that concludes my chair's report, and the next item on our agenda is the DMCC audit, and our presenters, I believe, are beaming in. Is that right, Kathleen?
Madam Chair, Craig Popenhagen is beaming in, and I believe his colleague Joe Duda from CliftonLarsonAllen is here in person.
Okay, wonderful. So if Mr. Duda would like to come forward, and Mr. Popenhagen will be on. I think we'll be able to see him and hear him briefly shortly.
Thank you, guys. I'm Joe Duda. I'm a director in private industry at CliftonLarsonAllen, and ordinarily my job with the firm is to work with our clients that are privately held businesses and their owners. But being a part of our firm's local leadership and a Rochester resident, part of Southern Minnesota, I'm happy to be here today to help hand you off to my public sector colleague, Craig Popenhagen, who is the engagement principal on the DMCC audit, and Craig is here on the line today. So I will hand it off to Craig today.
All right, very good. Am I coming through okay?
You are, Craig, though I would suggest this room has a lot of echo in it, and I would suggest that you don't speak too rapidly or we might miss some of what you're saying.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Well, yes, as Joe mentioned, I'll talk briefly about the audit results today. The audit reports have been issued. Synopsis of the audit is that it went very well. Field work went very smoothly. And then, Cody, are you turning the pages for me on the presentation here?
Just a minute,
Allison.
Craig. Okay, now they're turning.
Okay. So we'll just run through the presentation here on the agenda page. I'll talk just a little bit about the financial statements, talk a little bit more about the audit results, and then close with just some required communications that we have to provide to all oversight boards who are accepting the audit reports. So the next slide regarding financial statements. Basically, the financial statements are prepared on a consistent basis with what you saw a year ago, which was the first audit a year ago. This is year 2. Again, the financial statements are prepared in accordance with governmental accounting standards. The DMCC is a single program entity, so on the statement of revenues and expenses and changes in fund balance, we present the natural classification of expenses. So, for example, if it's, from contracted payments, professional services, compensation, things like that. So, same basis of presentation as the previous year. The DMCC is a component unit of the City of Rochester. So, the financial statements that are presented here for this meeting, the DMCC will also be included in the City of Rochester's annual financial report. So there's a handoff that we have to do to the city's auditors for them to do that, and that has been done. Basically, the recording component unit status, the DMCC EDA is not considered to be a component unit of the DMCC, simply because there's enough separation between the boards of directors and the autonomy that the EDA has. We did not have to report the EDA as a component unit of DMCC. That is also the same as last year. The next slide is just a summary of the assets and liabilities of the DMCC. The blue bars are the asset side, the red bars are the liabilities. You'll see for both years that the assets do equal the liabilities, and the reason for that is basically because the DMCC is a pass-through type entity. So how this works is the EDA does work on the DMC plan. They submit reimbursement requests to the DMCC, and likewise then the DMCC submits reimbursement requests to the City of Rochester. So because of the flow-through manner of the operations, that assets do equal liabilities. The nice thing is, compared to 2014, the receivables and payables are much less than they were a year ago. And that's just simply because, the MAPS process, the reimbursement process is working very well. So at the end of 2015, you basically see 1 month of receivable from the City of Rochester and 1 month of payable to the EDA, as opposed to the previous year, 2014, it was multiple months. And really that was just because 2014 was the startup year, and it just took a little while to kind of get the flow of the transactions and the reimbursement process working fluidly. So it's working very well in 2015. That's the reason for basically the decrease in assets and liabilities, is because funds are being passed through faster in 2015. The next slide is a summary of the revenues and expenditures. And here again you have a comparison of the 2 years now. The red bars represent expenditures. The blue bars represent revenues. Again, revenues equal expenses for the same reason that assets equal liabilities. It's because of the flow-through nature of the activity from DMCC through to EDA. The difference in the height of the bars just has to do with the amount of activity that occurred in 2015 compared to 2014. So if you look at the budget to actual statements in the audit report, you'll notice that there's expenses are less than budgeted, again just because of a little bit of a timing difference in the level and timing of activity that occurred during 2015. The next slide is talking about audit results, and we issued a clean opinion on the financial statements. So we are comfortable that the financial statements and the supporting disclosures are correctly presented in accordance with accounting principles. We perform the audit under government auditing standards, and the reason for that is, for one, because it flows, the DMCC financials, again, do get included into the City of Rochester's financial statements, and because of the, the amount of government funding that's coming through here. Performing the audit under government auditing standards gives oversight bodies and agencies something familiar to their own audit reports that they can relate to. So we did do that. There is a separate report then on internal controls that we had to issue. and we had no findings on internal controls. So that's good. So that's a clean report. Since the DMCC is technically a government agency, we have to perform what's called we call it the Minnesota Legal Compliance Audit. And basically that's a compliance checklist that is published by the state auditor's office that we have to test compliance and report on that. It's basically a subset of state statutes that we're testing here, compliance with. And here, again, it's a clean report. We had no findings for Minnesota legal compliance. The next slide is required communications, and this is just a synopsis of the communications that we as auditors have to provide to all oversight boards. So one is, first item is that the audit provides reasonable but not absolute assurance. So what that basically means is we did not look at every invoice that was paid through. We looked at items on a test basis. We looked at items on a sample basis. So that's the reason for that statement. The next one on accounting policies. Basically, there were no changes in accounting policies or standards in 2015. The accounting policies are summarized in Note 1 to the financial statements. I always like to talk about the third bullet, audit adjustments. And it's always nice when I can report that we, as the auditors, did not identify any adjustments that needed to be reported. Basically, the management team had all of those adjusting entries reported. It was a very clean audit. Management was well prepared and ready, so as a good end result, we had no audit adjustments. And as with last year, very good cooperation from management and everyone in the DMCC. We got what we needed, everything we asked for in a timely fashion, and got a complete response to all of our requests. The last slide is just some items that we have to complete yet, and that is basically we have to prepare the IRS Form 990 for filing later this summer or this fall. So that is one item that we will be taking care of here in the coming weeks, and if we follow through till last year's services, I will be back to present the 990s to you later in the upcoming weeks. So those are my prepared remarks. I guess we can field some questions if there are any, and otherwise, Madam Chair, I will turn it back to you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Popenhagen or Mr. Duda? All right, seeing none. I believe we are in need of a motion.
Yeah, Dale Martinson, my esteemed assistant treasurer, and I went over it. We were very happy to have clean audit report, and so I would, back up. I'd make a motion to approve the audit. Second.
There's a second from Mayor Ryback. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. 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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Popenhagen and Mr. Duda, for your work on this. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you likewise as well, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
I'd like to welcome the City of Rochester to the table for the update from the city. Welcome, Council President. Oh, and I'd also just like to note for my colleagues and others here in the room that I'm very pleased to be able to welcome Senator Nelson to our meeting today.
All right. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you once again for this opportunity. I'll keep my comments this morning relatively brief, given the more in-depth discussion that we'll be having at our second meeting today. First, I'll talk a little bit about our design standards. The City of Rochester has a leadership role in retaining the University of Minnesota Design Center to prepare design standards for the DMC area. The DMC EDA is working with the city on this topic as well. The design standards are intended to lead to the enactment by the city of improved design standards that take the best of many of the efforts that we have previously undertaken and include several major plans such as the DMC Development Plan, the prior Downtown Master Plan, and the prior urban design standards, so that hopefully the city will end up with an improved design standard and perhaps more important for our development community, a single source of reference. At a recent meeting of the City Council Committee of the Whole, the Council did instruct City Administration and Planning staff to start the process of public engagement and input on these standards and targeting a final discussion and adoption later this year. So we're moving forward on that topic. Somewhat related, you might like to know that the City Council at our last meeting agreed to engage with a consulting group called Grounded Solutions Network to research additional housing strategies and focusing on the merits of approaches such as inclusionary housing. As the city continues to evolve our planning and development strategies, we just want to make sure that we're being very comprehensive in our analysis of all options. So that report is also due back later this fall in about October. Talk a little bit about an interesting subject of interim parking. Mr. Ryback will greatly appreciate this, I hope. Due to the many development proposals that the city and DMC EDA are receiving and the time that it will take to get the transit mode and parking alternatives vetted and reviewed and selected, city staff are suggesting that an interim parking management strategy be implemented that would utilize recommendations from the DMC development plan and other recommendations from the city's planning and public works staff, SRF, who is our transit program management firm, to arrive at a parking strategy for an interim before we have an opportunity to select and implement some of the broader initiatives. City Council reviewed a draft of those recommendations at our meeting on June 23rd, and we authorized staff to provide additional information in the next 30 days that may lead to the initiation of a process that will could be implemented while we wait for those broader solutions. City is taking a lead, but we're also working with DMC EDA and Mayo Clinic staff. A unique element of this strategy, of potential strategy, is that it's based more on uses rather than simple zoning. In other words, rather than looking at only whether a development is commercial or residential and the resulting parking spaces needed, what we're really going to look at is how those parking spaces are truly utilized over the course of the day and week. And we feel this has the potential of significantly reducing the number of overall parking spaces required. So we're excited to see where that ends up. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about give you a WMBE update. Under the DMC legislation, you're aware that the city has the responsibility and lead role in ensuring that WMBE contracting and employment efforts are made for the public infrastructure projects funded with the $585 million in DMC funding. The mayor and council reviewed the status of WMBE at our meeting on June 23rd. I believe a short written report has been provided for you and should be available. In the last few months, city staff have been working again with SRF and meeting with several other expert governmental resources on this matter, and we are very appreciative of their suggestions, advice, and informational materials that they've been providing. Based on those discussions, the city believes that our current policy, which is in effect and able to be utilized, should be augmented with a further detailed implementation plan. We'll be working on that plan, and an outline of which is attached, and that goal is also to be completed within the next 90 days. Some points that might be noteworthy for the board, the city did establish a 4% contractor goal for the Mayo Civic Center and Recreation Senior Center project. Those projects are currently at or slightly above the goals and have resulted in over $5 million of WMBE contracts. The city is also participating in a local supplier diversity program with Mayo Clinic and the Chamber of Commerce, and in fact there's an upcoming conference on that topic on July 14th. The city is also researching how WMBE program can work for the supplier purchasing that the city does from the Minnesota State purchasing contract, from which we obtain a majority of our contract purchases. And finally, the city is also gathering information and links to information to be able to advise WMBE companies how they can become certified for the 3 programs listed in the DMC WMBE utilization plan, and also for the Mayo Chamber supplier diversity list and the state of Minnesota supplier contract list. We feel this information will be very useful to many of our colleagues throughout southeast Minnesota as we ramp up those efforts. With that, I will conclude my comments and gladly entertain questions.
Are there questions, colleagues? Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to welcome the EDA up to the table for your presentation. Am I skipping something?
I think we've got one other city update.
Oh, pardon me. I'm sorry. Welcome to the city. I was mixing that up. We have a project update, I believe, from Ms. Baker and Mr. Carmody. Thank you. My apologies. Sorry.
There we go.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for giving us a few minutes to share this exciting development with you. We started working with the Metropolitan Design Center last fall as a tremendous resource in our state to help us define some better, more clear design standards for our community to be used in the DMC district. One of the things that they were able to do is to take different sets of design guidelines that we already have in place, consolidate that into one resource for us, and put together a very fantastic document for us to be able to use. I don't know if you can pass me the clicker. There we go. We'd had a number of very disappointing and unfortunate headlines in our newspapers over the last few weeks, but I have to say this one is by far my favorite. Not only was it good positive news, but I think it's a really great example of some of the effort that's happening right here in our community to try to advance not only the vibrance and activity within our community and to help it be a thriving economy, but really also to recognize that we can, in the built environment, support better health outcomes in our communities as well. This is really small, and I apologize for that. I want to just point out 3 major factors that go into these design guidelines. One is that they do ensure that all development would make a positive contribution to the greater vision of a thriving, active, and healthy community. The second is that this does help to streamline several sets of documents, principles, and guides so that we have one resource document that we can sit down with developers and go through and identify really what the objectives and goals are that we're trying to achieve. And it helps to convey those expectations that those projects will be measured against. We're really happy to have this resource and to continue to work with the Metropolitan Design Center in bringing these forward.
Thank you, Mitzi, and members of the DMCC board. My name is Patrick Sieb, and just a couple of comments before I introduce our main presenter for this topic. We have been working, as Council President Staber said earlier, we've been working closely with the city in developing these design guidelines. And I just want to echo the comments by the Mitzi Baker, the planning director, about the importance of this as a tool to help advance development, to help clarify expectations, community expectations to developers, and really to help support decision-making processes that you'll be involved in and members of City Council. So we turned to the University of Minnesota Metropolitan Design Center to assist us in developing this set of design guidelines. And here with us today is John Carmody, who is a senior research fellow, longtime staff member, professor at the University of Minnesota, an architect, and representing the team from the University of Minnesota Metropolitan Design Center. And he will take a few moments to walk through what is the intent behind the design guidelines and how they will help advance our work. So, John.
Great. Thank you very much. This has been a really interesting and exciting and challenging project for us, and we've really enjoyed working with the city on it. The design guidelines, as Mitzi and other speakers have said, are really based on a long history of excellent planning documents here at the university. And by the way, the screen is so far away and so small, it's very hard for you to see, but I think you have a copy of what I'm talking about. You know, most important is the Downtown Rochester Master Plan in 2010, which is kind of the governing master plan, and then the DMC Master Plan, which came along in I've got 2015 there. I don't know if that's exactly the right date for it, but the recent DMC Master Plan. And there's several other plans. And all of them share, this slide is a little faint, but I put it in here because if you go through all of them, they really share 4 fundamental goals that are part of the vision. One is a thriving economy, one is a sustainable city, one is a healthy city, and one is a vibrant public realm. And those things all mutually reinforce each other. The purpose of the guidelines, as we've said, is rooted in the previous planning documents. The fact that they're not consistent with each other necessarily, they don't cover all the relevant topics, and they're not clearly required by the city zoning ordinance. The new guidelines address that by distilling and integrating those guidelines, working through the conflicts, including prescriptive requirements that can be put into a zoning ordinance, and also addressing some innovative areas that have not been included in previous documents. And as others have said, they'll be used by the City of Rochester in the DMC EDA project review process, but they'll also serve to inform planning and infrastructure decisions on streets in the public realm. This is a particularly hard slide to read, but it's a list of all of the guidelines contained in the document. I think the key thing to note here is there's really 3 groups of guidelines. One of them is the downtown district. These are the planning scale goals and aspirations that are consolidated in one place here. The second is streets and corridors, and the third is individual buildings. These would be the requirements for developers. And I picked one guideline as an example in each of those 3 areas. The first one with the downtown district is create a safe, inviting, and connected public realm. So you can see these are more broader and general. Within each guideline, we give background, relationship to goal, a statement of a performance requirement, and in this case, planning recommendations. And a connected public realm essentially means that the streets, the plazas, the parks, and so forth form a network. They form an appealing way to walk through the city, which reinforces walkability and health. Other guidelines in this category are establishing signature open spaces in each of the sub-districts, reusing and restoring buildings where possible, infusing the city with public art, and having mixed-use development. The streets and corridors section, and we worked with the Public Works Department on this, starts with designing multimodal streets, prioritizing pedestrians first. This is really related to the city's complete streets policy. It's the idea that you're addressing streets have multiple functions. You start with pedestrians, you provide for bicycles, you provide for mass transit, you provide safe roadways as well. That doesn't mean every single street accommodates all those uses, but the networks as a whole allow the city to be prioritized for pedestrians. And in this part of the standards, we give a lot of detail about everything from sidewalk widths and tree planting and lighting standards and all of the things that are scattered about but are nevertheless important for really establishing a walkable and inviting city. Here's a couple of images of advanced or enhanced stormwater management techniques that we would put in the boulevards of the streets. And then we look at different ways in which streets can be aligned to accommodate all these different uses and deal with stormwater management and so forth. The last section, buildings, the guideline I've selected here is design buildings to enhance a sense of urban enclosure. And this means, again, building to the lot lines on this important streets so that we create the kind of streets and plazas and urban spaces that are inviting and active and populated by people. And this gets into specifics like building heights and setbacks and so forth. Other guidelines in this area deal with maintaining sunlight and views in buildings, creating a vibrant streetscape. In other words, how do you treat the first level? We don't want big blank walls and parking lots on the sidewalks. And also the idea of adaptability and flexibility in spaces. In buildings, it's ideal if you have these kind of big, high-ceiling spaces, especially on the first level. They lend themselves to incubators. They lend themselves to the kind of collaborative gathering spaces that an innovative district wants to have. But also how you treat a parking ramp on the first floor, that it has shops or it has other interventions that make it supportive of the city and also adaptable to future uses. If we get to a place where we're relying more on mass transit or driverless cars or things like that, we don't have to tear down all these parking ramps. And then finally, I'll just mention that the standards include recommendations on sustainable and healthy building standards. And some of these standards are things that wouldn't necessarily be required on every building, but could be used in an incentive package. So we're recommending some enhanced energy and sustainability targets that are actually similar to the ones used on state-bounded buildings, but they set performance targets. There's a range of possible guidelines like LEED and other things that we could certainly do here, but I think we'd have to evaluate how we approach that. But I think the performance targets are the key thing. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Other questions? Mayor Ryback.
First up, I just wanted to say, Mr. Carmody, I'm really excited that you made a quick reference to it, but the issue of sunlight. In a climate where we're welcoming people from warmer places, but we have a lot of sun, I think it's one of those issues that we should be thinking a lot about. And how does a person's experience here, if they're indoors, be one where they're not in a dark place? But I want to go to a second question that I didn't hear there. One of the most significant design challenges I find here is this issue of navigation through 3 levels. Subway, street, skyway. How did you address that? And is there a place to give some guidance to people about how we connect between those?
Yes, that's a really important issue. It shows up in all of the previous planning studies as a concern that everybody's trying to address, because obviously there's great benefits to skyways and subways in the wintertime, and yet they tend to drain the life off of the street, and you don't necessarily have a population density to make all those levels interesting and exciting. We consolidated recommendations about that. There is a guideline. I didn't show it here. But the primary things that seem to be important is to make it visible, first of all, not make it sort of a hidden matrix of systems. And you could do that by, for example, if we're redesigning the public realm in the heart of the city, having some towers, glass towers that make it clear how you get from space to space. Obviously, if you have the opportunity in a building or a building lobby to have an open atrium where you can connect the levels, that's good as well. And then in the DMC plan, there's suggestions for things like a sunken courtyard, like Rockefeller Center in front of the Mayo buildings. Again, that gets daylight and openness and connection to those different levels. I don't think those 3 levels are going away anytime soon, so we have to be really clever about how we make that all work together, I think.
Mayor Rabak?
Madam Chair, just, I think you articulate the issue right. This is, in my mind, the time in which something could be done about that. The stair tower type of thing that you mentioned, there have been 2 iterations of the Nicollet Mall in Minneapolis that both had that as the solution to doing that, and in both cases they were removed. And it strikes me the only true way to get this done is actually to have it be part of guidelines when new buildings are built. To me, one of the few successful ways is to begin to require that the skyway be pushed to the streets. You can see where you're going. And to, I think in the subway system here, trying to look for opportunities to bring light into that. I don't, want to micromanage it from here, but I just feel that if you're going through this large process, it would strike me that a much richer conversation of recommendations and requirements on that's vetted on what the public here wants to accept, would be really important by not going very deep into this. I think we're missing the only opportunity we have to pull these systems together.
Well, it'd be great to, if you have a chance to look at what we've written and look for more specific comments, but I think you're giving me ideas on how we might be a little more requirement-oriented in that. It'll always be on a case-by-case basis, depending on where the property is in the system.
Thank you. Mr. Doherty.
Could you go over the setbacks again? In reading this, I wasn't quite clear on how the setbacks worked and what you were recommending for setbacks.
Okay. Well, in the whole DMC district, the recommendation is to build to the lot lines, or in a corner lot to build to both lot lines, so that we create an enclosure at the street. And that building base is 2 to 4 stories high, typically, and then above that, we set the buildings back at least 10 feet. So it gives more light and view and keeps kind of a human scale on the street. So that's the basic idea. Now,
The lot line.
pardon me?
From the lot line to the curb, how much space is that now?
From the lot line to the curb, we're recommending here that there's a frontage zone of at least 2 feet by a building, 8-foot sidewalk, and at a minimum a 6-foot, what's called the amenity zone or the boulevard, where
16 feet.
Yeah.
And then you can go back 20 from that?
No, you can go back 0 from that, unless you have mitigating circumstances like you're creating a sidewalk cafe, or you're trying to get the building to build right on the, not on the sidewalk, but right on the edge of the public realm on the property.
Why is that?
It's really to activate the street and create a sense of enclosure. If it's open to setting buildings back, I think the feeling is that you don't have as lively a sidewalk, you don't have as active a space, and you're creating these larger lawns and setbacks. You want, it's really about urban design principles to create an urban area.
Right now, the downtown doesn't have any setback requirements for buildings. You can build to the lot line. There will be some exceptions to what we just spoke about in terms of being able to build to the lot line in areas where we have too much of a constrained right-of-way, but we think there's a need for a wider sidewalk and pedestrian realm. We may need buildings in those specific corridors to be set back more so that they can use their own space for the sidewalk cafes and landscaping and things that they want, because the sidewalk width is simply too narrow for it.
Okay. Yeah, Mayor Brady.
Well, first of all, I want to strongly agree with both the comments from Mr. Rybick and Mr. Doherty. It is a unique opportunity, I think, to do something that's all 3 levels that they're coordinated and worked together. It's frustrating if you can see a skyway but don't know how to get in it unless you have to go through somebody's building or something like that. A few years ago, and Mayor Rybeck, you were a part of this at one point too, the Mayor's Institute on City Design. Yeah. Our area that we studied was the Peace Plaza, and one of the architects that was part of the team said that space reminds me of a mini Rockefeller Plaza. Tall buildings on both sides, minimal sun, things like that, and so how do you work with all of that? They weren't there to give us the solution right away, but it is a challenge in that area. But I'm hoping that we can do something that, you know, whether it's towers that somehow give you the sunlight all the way through, and a path that you can get through there, and that it's accessible for most of the day and night. I can always remember back once in Minneapolis it was, where my wife and I went to a restaurant from the hotel and we couldn't get back through. Yep. And it was middle of winter, and a suit coat didn't do it to walk outside. So you got to think of all of those things, and certainly we've got a more vulnerable, I think, population that's here utilizing those as well. So it's a great opportunity this time to really look at all of that. And when you come right up to the sidewalk, I think if I heard, it isn't that it's just going to be a brick wall. There's got to be some activity there, that either a window that goes into shops or whatever it might be,
yeah,
or a
there's
restaurant.
a lot of detail about window areas and uses on the first floor and that type of thing. I'll just make one quick comment. It's not just sun, it's wind as well, which I think you were alluding to. And so I think sun and wind studies on new buildings would be very important to create a kind of livable winter city.
And we are a windy city, not just from the council and the mayor, but it's
Mayor Ryback.
Madam Chair, Mayor, you're raising a really interesting point, because when you're dealing with these design issues, there's also a management issue. The reason you and your wife weren't able to get back to your hotel is because the Minneapolis Skyway system is different than the St. Paul Skyway system. The St. Paul Skyway system is a public system that was paid for by the public. In Minneapolis, it's paid for by each building owner, and each building owner can control it. So there's this really complicated negotiation. There's a middle ground you could get to, which is to have an easement, a public or a private system, but with a public easement where the public's got a right to certain things. I don't know what it is in Rochester. What is it? Is it?
Go ahead.
Well, many of those are actually privately built, but the city actually has agreements with the owners on the hours of operation to make sure that they do stay open so that people can connect to the places that they're trying to get to. So it's kind of a hybrid.
So, Madam Chair, it does strike me that in there could be a sense that's not universal.
Yes, it is.
It's universal. Okay. Oh, great. Wonderful. Okay. That's good.
Are there further questions or comments from? Great. Yeah, very good report. Thank you much. Tonight,
Do you want to finish?
I'm quite excited to hear the progress that you are making on this. It's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome the EDA up.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Board. Thank you very much for the invitation once again to present our progress. Speaking of progress and momentum, we have much going on. So I'm going to share, we have a two-part presentation this morning. We're going to start by talking about some of the EDA updates in terms of the priority projects and the business strategies. And then we're going to move to the Discovery Square progress. And I think all of you are quite familiar with some of the recent happenings that we've had on that front in terms of Discovery Square, Mayo Clinic's announcement, and the bio conference that we recently attended in San Francisco. So we'll also invite two of our colleagues up for that portion of the presentation. So I'm going to start with our DMC EDA update. We'll talk about 3 of the DMC priorities that you've established, and we'll give you some progress report on that, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the business strategies. You do have this handout in front of you. All right, so Heart of the City, we all know that that's a high priority for DMC. We're working hard on that front. You heard some of the design guideline discussions, which of course will touch Heart of the City. We have a committee in place. Mayor Brady, you are leading our fine committee for Heart of the City. Thank you very much for that, and the work is ongoing. We have 6 qualified firms who have submitted proposals for the public realm of the Heart of the City space, and that's really excellent. They're excellent firms. They've been vetted through that committee, and right now, last week actually, those proposers met in Rochester and did a walkthrough of the space so that they could actually see what they're looking at and what the expectations are, and that was a very good meeting. Our colleagues from the city and EDA hosted those meetings. Timeline you'll see up there, I don't need to read it to you, but between today and August, we'll be bringing this forward for the recommendation of the firm. So great work on that front. I'm really excited to see that moving forward. Mayor, do you have any comments?
Well, thank you, but it's, you know, that's the group that the Heart of the City, the task force, we had 95 or 100 people that wanted to be on it, which shows the interest in the community that they want to be a part of that. And then, what did we have, 12 or so proposals to start with that have been 11. Now cut down. And they're not only national, but have international experience as well. So that's exciting. We're going to be looking forward to what comes back and the potential. I'm sure it'll stretch all of our minds a little bit as to, can we really do that here in Rochester? But hopefully that's the way it'll be.
I agree, Mayor. I hope we can get over the can we really do that in Rochester and on to what can we do in Rochester. So thank you very much. In the spirit of you all knowing that transportation will be a very key component to our afternoon 3-group discussion, we'll just give you a quick update from the EDA's perspective. The city and SRF, as you know, are leading the team of consultants, and they've moved that forward and are kicking that off right now. There are 4 key study areas, which you'll hear about this afternoon. And the DMC EDA is sitting on those groups with the city, working hand in hand, and we are making sure that we're also integrating the underlying research and the findings of the original DMC development plan. So all of that will be incorporated into this work so that we can prevent duplication and make sure that we're using that as the platform in terms of visioning for transportation. All right, DMC metrics dashboard. Last month we brought forward the plan that we're moving forward right now in terms of creating our metrics dashboard. This will be a dashboard that you'll be able to track with us, with the EDA, the progress that's going on across the economic development front, a quality of life front, and so it'll be an at-a-glance for you, so you'll be able to keep pace and see where we are with everything from funding to development to the projects that we're working on. If you recall, we have Wilder Foundation working with us. They are right now gathering the data, and we're going back to 2012 so that we can make sure that we understand the before and after, if you will. And this will be a tracking tool that we'll be using on the EDA for the next 20 years. If you're all still here, we'll be able to track it on that front. Yes?
Could I just ask a question? I think the dashboard, the metric dashboard is very important. I must admit it's a little hard for me to sort of keep track of all the moving parts. And I'm just wondering, are you going to share with us a draft of the dashboard, or are you going to bring us a final product?
Well, we shared a draft the last 2 times. We walked you through components of it, so you've got to see it in progress, and we'll bring a draft in August so that you can see it as a complete project, and certainly room for improvement. And actually, this probably will be a work in progress from today until we'll be adding measures, we'll be adding metrics depending on what's going on with the activity.
I think as soon as you have that prepared, it'd be nice to get it to us so we have a chance to spend some time on it before the meeting.
Good. Happy to. The other note I wanted to make on this dashboard deal is the data that we are gathering is really important for the entire community of Rochester. And so what we're doing is working with other organizations in the downtown area particularly, such as READY and with the city and with Rochester Convention and Visitors Bureau, so that we are all, at least we're all using either the same data or the same data source and/or the same numbers. So when developers or interested parties or people that are going to move to Rochester, Minnesota for some reason or another are entering different websites, they'll see the same information so that people know that we're kind of united, if you will, and all facing the same direction. That's sometimes easier said than done, but we're working toward that. I mentioned last time that we have an urban prototyping festival coming forward this September. Prototyping has been pretty active across the nation for quite a few years now. It's a business strategy that actually helps cities explore and test out changes that might happen in a city. They do this by building and constructing in temporary installations. So we've got quite a few people interested in this. For the first time in Rochester, we brought in some colleagues from San Francisco that have done this in 9 cities across the nation, so they know how to do this. We are very thrilled to report that we have 24 interested groups that are coming forward to do installations, and it's everything from water, how we treat water, to safety, to how we use our roads, biking, entertainment. So you'll see all walks of this installation. We're going to narrow this down to about a dozen installations that will be featured at this prototyping festival. And a really great part about the festival is that it's on the heels of the Mayo Clinic Transform Conference. The Mayo Clinic Transform Conference actually has hundreds of people that attend this conference, and it's all about innovation and transforming. And the theme this year, which is perfect for us, is called Health and the Built Environment. So we're working together with Mayo Clinic on this because this is an opportunity. I believe 20 different countries come to the Transform conference. So this is a great opportunity to highlight Rochester and some of the changes and potential interest from groups in this innovation space. St. Mary's Place, I think you've seen some activity perhaps in the news reports that we send to you. If you recall, we have a work group that's moving forward right now with St. Mary's Place. The work group consists of the EDA, the city, property owners, Mayo Clinic, and neighborhood organizations. And what they've done is come together to talk about a methodology to design the public realm and the public infrastructure space for this particular sub-district. So what we are hoping to bring forward is opportunities for us to actually look at the entire sub-district and what kind of infrastructure can be put in place and supported for more than one developer, for multiple developers, if you will. We're working with the University of Minnesota Metropolitan Design Center to work on this. And last time I shared with you as well that this phasing that we're doing, we started with a data gathering and analysis phase. Our city colleagues have done an excellent job pulling together a lot of data in that space to help us understand what we're looking at: skyways, subways, tunnels, streetscapes. Right now, we're moving toward the design sprint, and this is the place where in a couple of short weeks, we bring these groups together to really figure out what our options are in that space. And what it does is takes great talent and expertise, bring them together in a shorter format than taking months to do this, and come up and create these opportunities and ideas. The draft plan and review of that will take about 30 days, and then we're going to come to this board for your review. I think it's going to be a great process and perhaps a prototype for us to use for other sub-districts as Heart of the City moves forward. Discovery Square will be moving forward right now, which you'll hear about in a moment. So I think so far this model has worked very well, and we have really positive comments from the city as well, or our colleagues, the community. Energy and sustainability. You recall we were awarded a 2-year, $150,000 Midwest Climate and Energy Grant from McKnight Foundation. We've met with McKnight Foundation and CEE, the group that developed our energy plan. And what we're doing right now is trying to figure out the best way to resource this effort so that we are able to realize the goals of our energy and sustainability plan, perhaps using some support from CEE and/or hiring another staff person for the next 2 years. So we're walking through some different models, the best way to do this. We want expertise around kind of coming in running, if you will, in energy and sustainability. And our colleagues from CEE and McKnight are really helping with that discussion. In your packet, we have our DMC work plan. Just to remind you, last year you approved our work plan, our DMC EDA work plan, and we based it off, of course, the goals and objectives of the DMC plan in general. What we've done is, after a 6-month time frame, we've gone through that work plan. We look at it quarterly to make sure that we're on track, we're on pace. Although we're only 6 months into the year, I believe that we are tracking really quite well over in terms of the work that we are doing on the EDA front. We will have a pretty heavy next 6 months as we start to engage in the marketing efforts, which we've just started, and Discovery Square is a good example of some of the work we'll be doing around that. So this work plan, again, is in your packet, so feel free to look through that, and if you have any questions or comments, I'm happy to take any of those. We're trying to do it at a glance so you can see the work that we're on track, perhaps behind on some of the stuff we've completed. And as you walk through a plan like this, there will be some items in there that probably aren't relative, or that we probably don't need to do anymore. It's been a helpful tool for us. We'll develop something similar with your guidance on this small work group as we work through our budgeting process. And then finally, on our EDA report, I just want to talk a bit about the communications, engagement, and marketing work that has been happening. This topic, DMC, gets a lot of airtime in the media, which is just fabulous. It's really created, you know, the market is very active right now. We continue to get a lot of information or requests from developers and interested parties that want to come to either participate, build in Rochester, and or live in Rochester, which is of course key. So this is just a snapshot of some of the media stories that we're getting, and you will see in our next report with Discovery Square that these reports have really gone national and international. We're capturing a lot of attention. We had over 100 press stories just in the last probably 30 to 60 days, which is a lot for a project. We have about a $230,000 reach through social media, or 230 member reach through social media and the blogs just over the last couple months. So our presence and our awareness is starting to pick up, and you'll see quite a bit more. And we'll be much more targeted now, as you know, as we start to move into the Discovery Square and Heart of the City activity. So I'm going to pause on that front right now before I introduce our colleagues for our Discovery Square report. And if you have any questions. Mayor?
I don't have a question, but because energy and sustainability was listed in here, I wanted to just point out that, because we had talked about this earlier, and I think Mr. Campbell was one that talked a little bit about what might be available from the McKnight folks, and we have now 2 energy fellows that are here, 10 week, that McKnight is paying for. I met with them earlier this week. They are outstanding and have already are uncovering things that kind of like, well, you could do this, or the money you save here, and so on and so forth, talking about a sustainability office, all of those. One of them is going to USC, the other one is going to Columbia, so they're both from areas that are the 2 largest cities in the United States, and one of them actually is originally from Minnesota. The other one is from Slovakia, I believe. So it's very diverse from that standpoint as well. But it was really refreshing to visit with them and know what they're doing. And I remember when we met first with the folks that were proposing this, they said, these are students that won't need to be babysat. They know what they're doing, and they're graduate students, and they're really quite impressive. But so we're very fortunate to have them, and thanks again to McKnight for helping fund that program.
Mayor, we might want to make sure that they are attached to our technical team, because it sounds like they'd bring some great resource and information to us.
Good.
That would be great. Really, we welcome that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. If we don't have any other comments on this report, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Bolton to start to introduce our Discovery Square report. I'm also going to introduce two colleagues, Dr. Otley, who's Mayo Clinic's leader of business development and ventures and was very instrumental in this announcement in San Francisco, and Jamie Rothy, who's also with the DMC EDA team, to talk about our three things: the announcement of Mayo Clinic, our involvement in the ecosystem development, and also the bioscience conference. So, Jeff?
So thank you, Lisa. Members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to talk about Discovery Square. Before I do that, though, I'd like to provide another update from Mayo Clinic, and that is an announcement that was made, I think 2 weeks ago, that Mayo received a $142 million grant from NIH, which designated Mayo Clinic as the home of the National Precision Medicine Initiative Biospecimen Repository. And the reason I mention that is it really is another indicator and piece of evidence of our leadership position in precision medicine, a major initiative of President Obama, and one that we've invested heavily in. And I think this is a recognition. There's essentially one center in the country, and the major part of that center will be located in Rochester. So again, it's a great thing. There'll be jobs associated with it, and again, underscores our position. In terms of Discovery Square, just to put it in a little bit of context, if you think about Mayo's position as a national and international destination medical center, a key capability that we have within the organization is our ability to bring multidisciplinary teams, teams of scientists, teams of clinicians, allied health staff, together to really find solutions where solutions don't currently exist for serious and complex illnesses. And it's been an ability that has allowed us to move solutions through the discovery, translation, and application into the practice, probably more rapidly than any other academic medical center in the country. What Discovery Square allows us to do is really bring our teams together with industry and other academic institutions to even further accelerate our ability to do that. Now, Discovery Square, the physical location, you can see it in the orange circle. It's located really right in the hub of our research and development areas, facilities that we have, and also our reference lab that serves hospitals and clinics throughout the country and 140 countries internationally. So that's a major development and diagnostic development arm of the organization. So Mayo, when the plan was approved, the DMC development plan back in April 2015, and Discovery Square was identified as a key part, one of the sub-districts of that plan, Mayo looked at that and really tried to develop a plan that would allow us to catalyze that as a part of, key part of economic development, but also creation of the vibrancy of downtown Rochester. And you'll recall we provided some updates in January of this year, 2016. We completed a feasibility study that really looked at how we would develop the property that is owned by Mayo Clinic. And if you'll recall, Patrick Sieb last week talked about the other elements of Discovery Square, which includes space and place, human capital, an innovative culture and environment, access to ideas where people bump into one another randomly and create novel thoughts, and then capital resources. Since everyone I talk to is interested in the facilities part of Discovery Square, it seems, that's what I'll focus on today. So as I said, we completed a feasibility study. We own about 35% of the property that's included in Discovery Square. It's about a 6-block area. And we felt that we could really catalyze this through development. And so in developing a plan, we determined that the best approach was to partner with a real estate development company. And we went out into the market with RFPs and received 9 proposals from pre-qualified developers. I think the quality of the proposals, in my mind, clearly demonstrates that there is private market interest in this part of the project, and we're seeing private interest throughout the DMC. Our timeline is really to select a firm by the end of July that will begin to develop plans for a first building. Now, in the Mayo property alone, we could build out up to 2 million square feet of space, and that does, the design, at least preliminary design, provides for a lot of green space and also opportunities, again, for people, clinicians, scientists, students, entrepreneurs to meet in creative environments. So very exciting. The first building that we're looking at would be between 60,000 and 100,000 square feet. We would likely occupy about half of that building with our research activities, which would be research activities that would be most likely to attract industry to collaborate with us on that. Right now, we're anticipating beginning construction in late 2017. We've got to go through architectural designs once we have a developer on board. So again, we're very excited about it. We think this will serve as a key catalyst, not only for the Discovery Square, but other parts, the residential, retail aspects of downtown Rochester. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Otley to talk a little bit about the announcement that was made in BIO.
Thanks, Jeff. Dear colleagues, thank you for having us here. In early June, on the 7th, we were out at the BIO International Conference in San Francisco with a large team from across Rochester and the state of Minnesota, where Mayo Clinic announced our commitment to Discovery Square sub-district and opened formally a search for a real estate development firm to significantly expand our campus by more than 2 million square feet for research, commercial, and product development space in Discovery Square. We chose to go to BIO because BIO is one of the foremost international and national biotech events in the country, and this announcement is one of the foremost announcements internationally and nationally in terms of biotech. During the conference, we spoke with a lot of people. We shared a lot of information regarding DMC in general, and we specifically highlighted that Minnesota, the City of Rochester, and Mayo Clinic is deeply committed to enhancing our position as the premier center for global destination medical care. DMC's goal of creating a robust entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystem encourages startup companies and supports bioscience growth across our community and our state. From the feedback we've gotten from partners, the reception was outstanding, and we are actively engaged in lots of discussions with interested stakeholders about the possibility of joining us in Discovery Square. So the next steps in the process include 2. We are going to be selecting a strategic real estate development firm by the end of the summer, with hopes of breaking ground in the 4th quarter of 2017 on Discovery Square. So the announcement was really a milestone for Destination Medical Center, for the state of Minnesota, for our community, and for Mayo Clinic as we partner on this exciting initiative. And the Discovery Square announcement really gives us an opportunity to highlight multiple things, including Mayo Clinic's commitment to Discovery Square as a new address for innovation, education, research, and commercialization, to reinforce the Mayo Clinic mission and the specific things that Jeff talked about, which include our unique model of team-based medical care and team-based research care. as we make a commitment to industry-leading translational research. And finally, we are excited to leverage DMC's role in creating a cultural and physical environment in which Discovery Square, Rochester, Minnesota, Mayo Clinic, and the state of Minnesota can really flourish in biotech moving forward.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Couple observations. I think it's an aggressive schedule being able to break ground by the 17th. I hope you can stick with that because I think that's pretty important. I'd encourage you, I know it comes down to money. I'm a money guy, it's all money. But in order to get, I think, enough zing, I would encourage you to have a stretch goal and get up to at least 100,000 square foot. Again, I know I'm not writing the check, so it's easy for me to say, but you know, to get people interested from either coast, I think we got to really, that'll show more, the bigger we can go, the better commitment people will see and be more liable to locate here. So I would encourage you to, you know, big as you can, but again, I'm not writing the check, so that's my observation.
Thank you for sharing those thoughts.
I want to say I'm incredibly excited about this, and as much as I want everything to happen in Minnesota, I'm really happy you did that in San Francisco at BIO. I've been to that conference. It's the right place to be. I know, the Mayor, you've worked that a lot, haven't you? Mm-hmm. You're the Carol Merrill of BIO. You've been doing lots of presentations there. But the thing that I'm especially curious about as well, the building is super exciting. I'm interested in what sort of market response you got from people who said, I want to move XYZ to Rochester, and I think as we hear that answer, I want to understand who's reacting positively and who is saying, I want to be in Rochester, but I don't necessarily need or want to be in Discovery Square. Staying in tune with us on that, because should we be looking at ancillary types of facilities, lower rent, different, whatever else, so.
Mayor Ryback, that Jamie's going to answer some of that in her report right now, and which is really excellent because I think we got some great experience, but we also did research while we were there on that exact topic. Okay. So we had one other thing I didn't mention was we had some other colleagues join us. We had a colleague from the City Council join us, Nick Campion, to actually help us with this research and understand from other communities and organizations and groups what it takes to get people and companies here. We also, and you have a letter from Nick in your packet. I think it's at the bottom of your packet because he wanted you all to, he was unable to attend and he wanted you all to know the experience he had. We also had the chamber president join us from Rochester who also was participant in this research. And then we had a colleague from Ready along with the Mayo and DMC colleagues. So it was really a great representation from the city of Rochester. So Jamie?
Lisa, if I could just, before we get to the market research, address the issue of other space outside of Discovery Square. We are really attuned to that, and Mayo, along with Ready and the Chamber and others, if you think about the journey to growth, are looking for spaces that may be less expensive for startup companies, not necessarily located right in the prime of Discovery Square. So we recognize there's a balance to that, and we want to accommodate both needs.
Great.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Jamie Rothy, and I would come today to give you a little bit more context around what the BIO International Convention is, our strategies and objectives while we were there, and answer any additional questions that you have. We're going to move forward here. So the BIO International Convention is held in San Francisco on an the International BIO Convention is held in San Francisco this past year and moves around the country every year. It lasts for about a week. This past year we had over 16,000 attendees that came to that convention. There's people from across the world that attend as well. Over 500 different or 5,000 different companies are represented there. 40% of the people that attend are C-suite attendees as well. So it's the perfect audience for us to have conversations with and partnerships with. This year they had 76 countries attend and 48 states attend as well. There was 800 speakers, many different tracks that you could participate in, which we had a few of our groups attend those as well. And this year, as we built out our strategy, we worked closely with a company known as Nelson Biomedical. Barbara Nelson is based out of Minneapolis. She also has offices in Boston and Chicago and helped create our strategy and implement that while we were there. We had 3 key objectives while we were at the convention. It was to broaden the visibility and knowledge around DMC and Discovery Square. We really wanted to share the initiative itself, talk a little bit more detail about Discovery Square. This is the first time many of them have heard about it. Also talk about Minnesota and the life science strengths we have here. Also took this time as well because there are so many people gathered at this space. It was the perfect time for us to talk with news media as well and make those connections in that space. We also took this opportunity to gather research. We wanted to get a better understanding of a couple different things. Understand what big hubs were saying about themselves, what small hubs were saying about themselves, and continue to understand how we differentiate ourselves in that space. And then, of course, develop critical relationships. And we'll take a couple minutes on each of these. With broadening the visibility and building understanding and knowledge around DMC, as our group shared, we did have a pretty robust team that attended this year's convention. Lisa mentioned Rob Miller, the president of our area chamber of commerce. Nick Campion, council member, joined us as well, and along with a handful of other people from Mayo Clinic staff and the DMC EDA team. We had a large and robust communication strategy that we partnered with Mayo Clinic on and received a great amount of impact from that. 30 plus different groups picked up the story while we were there. We had a large amount of impact on social media. Over 18,000 people watched live the announcement of Mayo Clinic as well, which was great. And we continue to see interested parties and future stories on this topic. Regarding research, we had a series of different activities that happened in that area. As you can imagine, the convention floor is large, and so we used surveys to gather information from different hubs that we met with, different groups on the floor, and different countries and states that we met with to gather information. We also had activities around one-on-one meetings, small group meetings, different networking receptions, and gathered information at all of those activities as well. We wanted to share just some highlights that we gathered, and we'll have a more complete report in August to share with you, but wanted to share 3 highlights. The first is that, as many people have mentioned so far, is there is an appetite for some of the key differentiators that we started vetting with the groups that we met with. People are very interested in Mayo Clinic, are interested in our location, that it's easy to get from both sides of the coast. You don't have to take a 4-hour flight. It's 2 hours to both sides. And so we kind of tested out some of these different differentiators that we're beginning to discover. We also found out that many of the small hubs that are very close to our size are saying the exact same thing that we are. And so we're not differentiating ourselves at all from them. We do have some same qualities as some of the large hubs. So we need to continue to take that information and refine it and figure out how do we continue to differentiate ourselves. The last piece of information that I would share with the group regarding our research findings was that it is more than just the buildings. So the work that Patrick Sieb reported on in the past, it is about the culture and the connections, the communication opportunities, and these collisions that we talk about that are really important. So the way that the buildings are designed are great, and that there's a place for people to go. But it is important to have the culture and the environment that we're looking for to make a positive impact. The last piece that I want to share is the development of the critical relationships. We had a very robust activity schedule while we were there. I would say the team that we brought with us, their feet were tired, and the long days were put in with one-on-one meetings, floor work, meetings before and after the day were to start. And we met with a series of different groups. And Mary Ryback, I think this answers some of your questions on the activity that we did there. We met with investors and a variety of other funding sources, industry leaders, incubators, and accelerators. Across the board. We also looked at potential strategic partners as well. We wanted to gather information with each of these to not only understand what their current level of interest is, but also gather information on what their perceptions were of Rochester and working with Mayo Clinic and others. So it was a variety of information that we met with. We also had our partners with us during some of those meetings as well. So Mayo Clinic Ventures was a part of those conversations. Medical Alley joined, University of Minnesota, and DEED. And with that, as I mentioned, we will come back in the August meeting with a more developed and finalized report in August regarding this convention and next steps as we go forward.
Questions, comments? I wonder if I could ask just a little more detail. Let's just say you were talking to your friend and you came back and said, you know, we really got some good interest from X type of business, or Y wasn't that interested, or just give us a flavor of those conversations so we can understand them. Did anybody say, yes, sign me up? And
so I think our goal was to begin warm introductions to organizations. So just, I think with most people, you can't come in and say, would you want to move to Rochester today?
Right.
But it was warm introductions to organizations that have some interest, intentional interest of coming here. So organizations that we have some type of partnership already with. Some of it were cold introductions of people that were just interested in to learn more. I would say the reaction, and maybe more can share, is that most people that we met with are very interested in the work that's happening and started sharing more of what their timelines are and the work that they're doing or potential partnerships.
Just as a single example, I met with a young man who owns a company. It's a startup company with a really kind of different and interesting technology that could play well with our reproductive endocrinology area. He was tired of living, he's from the Midwest originally, he was tired of living in a high, expensive place with lots of traffic and lots of stress, life stress. His company, he felt, was mobile, and he would crave the opportunity to partner with Mayo Clinic. And Mayo Clinic partnerships is what this is about. They are going to come for Rochester, they're going to stay for Rochester, but they're coming for Mayo Clinic and that partnership. And I told him, let me know. He's a guy that has a family. I'll talk to you about Mayo Clinic and what it's like to raise a family here. And I will also set you up to talk with some of our reproductive endocrinologists. That relationship is where it goes from theory to reality. And I can say that our Mayo Clinic researchers are broad and diverse. We also have the advantage of having 5-state presence with 60,000 employees, 3 major sites plus the Mayo Clinic Health System. So our resources are vast, and I got the sense that some people actually don't appreciate that. They have no idea that Mayo Clinic has 60,000 employees and 5-state presence and a Mayo Clinic care network. So that's our job, is to do that. And then the job of the physicians and researchers in the group is to say, we can make the connections. Mayo is open for that kind of relationship, and that's what we want to drive Discovery Square forward on.
Yeah, if I could build on that a little bit, because Dr. Ali made some really important points. I think one of the things that we've got to overcome is we're not Cambridge and we're not San Francisco. And as I listened to the research that was reviewed at the EDA board meeting, one of the things that struck me is, you know, it isn't the distance, it isn't the difficulty of getting here, it's the fact, let's say a venture firm comes in, they think of Rochester as, well, I have 1 meeting in Rochester, whereas if they're San Francisco, they can do 10 meetings in a day, or Cambridge, they can do the same. What we've got to really convey is the breadth of activity at a Mayo Clinic and the ability to have 10 substantive meetings in a day with Mayo Clinic. And then as we bring, this is one of those things where you get things started and eventually have a critical mass beyond Mayo Clinic. I'd say the second thing that, as Dr. Otley mentioned, people don't realize is we have one of the largest FedEx hubs in the country. I think it was said second largest, which we should make sure that
I'm checking out.
it's one of the largest, but it's because of our reference lab business. And for many of these R&D activities, access to those types of logistics are really critical. So we have some treasures that we take for granted here that we've got to really begin to market. And, you know, partnering with EDA and other groups within the community, we will begin to market Rochester in that way. And then the final point that I'd make, I think this was fantastic for introductions. You know, our ventures group is really doing a lot of deals and now has the opportunity to talk about facilities that we could co-locate with some of the startups. Our business development group is looking at opportunities with mature companies to partner with Mayo Clinic on 5 strategic areas, and so there'll be direct marketing. And then we've also seen significant benefits when you have a CEO-to-CEO conversation, Dr. Noseworthy, with CEOs of other organizations about, the possibilities of partnering with Mayo Clinic. So this is one of the things that we are really at the starting line, but we feel very confident given companies that we've been in discussion with and their interest in locating to Rochester. So very exciting.
That's really helpful. I mean, when Dr. Otley, you went through that quick profile, I mean, I think the more we don't need to know who it is, but the idea of walking through those profiles and saying, okay, there's the Mayo relationship and there's all these other things. The fact of the matter is, all these other people can do a whole lot of things. We're the only one who's got Mayo. Okay, and so that's obviously where we play offense, but we have to play defense on the others. So we heard less expensive housing and lifestyle is one. We'll probably hear school within that thing. We'll probably hear others. And so the more you can take those profiles of people and then in this public-private partnership, get back to us, that sort of thing, while school emerges much more. And by the way, we've got a good story to tell on that, in comparison to sending a kid to school in San Francisco. So just the more we can be in that kind of touch, the better. Other questions, comments? Mayor?
Just a comment. As you pointed out, I was fortunate to go to 10 of these conferences 11 years ago. The first one I went to was in San Francisco. And then over the years, one of them I was always so impressed that Boston one year made the comment that they have a square block that they were going to give or something to somebody that would come and develop. We have 6 square blocks now that we're talking about. And I think you mentioned too, sometimes we take so much of this for granted here. And we're Minnesota nice. We don't want to brag. But I think it was Jimmy Pearsall, the baseball player, that once said, if you can do it, it ain't bragging. And we can do it. And it's pretty exciting to know that. And that partnership, a few years back when I would go there, again, you take it for granted, and others would kind of, yeah, okay, it's Mayo. But having made that announcement out there, I can imagine the kind of buzz that created too, because having been there before, and you already mentioned the numbers of states and countries that are there. It's pretty impressive. Thank you for the report, and thanks for being out there and bragging, because we need to do that.
I just realized in stepping in for the chair, I'm doing a lousy job of keeping us on schedule, so can I just thank you guys very much for that. It's really helpful. Stepping on to our final point here, Dale Martinson talking about the budget year-to-date update. Okay, Jim Beer is going to step in.
I'll give, since Dale's my assistant treasurer, he allowed me to give the
Okay.
report. I'll be real
bringing in
brief
big guns
since
here.
we're under a time constraint. On page 98, you'll see that we've spent about $500,000 of our 2016 budget of $4.2 million. That represents about 58% of the money, with 88% of the money remaining, with 58% of the year left to go. So we're in good shape. The one thing I'd like to note going forward is, as we start these projects, the money doesn't flow through our board, the DMCC board. Projects like the Chateau or the money for the transportation study that the city is funding, we authorize these studies, but the money does not flow, so they will not show up on our books. Dale and I are working with the EDA on how to report that to this board, since we do authorize those funds, but they don't show up on our books because the money flows through the city coffers. So that's kind of a work in progress. But other than that, not much else going on. We had a good audit, so I was happy with that.
Great. Okay. Seeing nothing else, the next regular meeting is going to be August 25th at 9:30. Kathleen, can you prompt me on what time we're back here and how the whole logistics of this meeting is going to work again?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the joint meeting between the DMCC, the city, and the EDA boards begins at 12:30 in this room. The configuration is going to change a little bit, so look for your name tags, and starting at 12:30.
So go forward and spend money in Rochester for lunch, and we'll see you back.
Good. I thought they were going to have some box.
Yeah, really.